Story 1. The Echo in the Empty Hallway. It was a late autumn evening, and the old Northwood High School was eerily quiet. As a janitor, I was used to the silence after the students and teachers had left, but tonight felt different. A heavy, damp chill hung in the air, seeping through the old brick walls. My shift usually ended around midnight, and by 10 p.m., I was the only soul left in the sprawling, dimly lit building. I was mopping the main hallway on the second floor, the rhythmic swish of the mop and the squeak of my bucket the only sounds. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to stretch and contort with a life of their own. I hummed a tuneless melody to myself, trying to ward off the growing sense of unease. It was just an old building, I told myself, prone to creaks and groans. Then I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper, like dry leaves rustling on concrete. It seemed to come from the end of the hallway, near the history classrooms. I paused, listening intently. Nothing, just the hum of the lights and the distant groan of the old heating system. I shrugged it off, attributing it to my imagination. But then it came again, clearer this time, a child's giggle, a soft, innocent sound, but utterly out of place in the deserted school. My blood ran cold. I knew for a fact that no one else was in the building. Every door was locked, every window secured. I gripped the handle of my mop tighter, my heart beginning to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding thin and reedy in the vast silence. No response. I waited, straining my ears. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, pressing in on me. I told myself it was just the wind, or perhaps a stray animal that had found its way inside, but the giggle had been too distinct, too human. I decided to check. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed my cleaning cart down the hallway, my eyes scanning the closed classroom doors. As I approached the history classrooms, the air grew noticeably colder, a damp, earthy chill that wasn't typical for the school's interior. The faint smell of old chalk and dust, usually present, was now mixed with something else, something sweet and cloying, like decaying flowers. I reached the end of the hallway. The last classroom, room 207, had its door slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness yawned within. I knew I had locked that door earlier. My hand trembled as I pushed it open further. The room was dark, the desks shrouded in shadows. I fumbled for the light switch, my fingers brushing against the cold, grimy wall. Click. Nothing. The bulb must have blown. I pulled out my flashlight, its beam cutting a shaky path through the gloom. The room was empty, the desks and chairs neatly arranged, but as I swept the beam across the back wall, I saw it. On the old blackboard, scrawled in what looked like fresh chalk, was a single word. Help. My breath hitched. I knew I hadn't written that. No one had. I took a step back, my eyes wide, and then, from the corner of the room, near the teacher's desk, I heard it again. The giggle. Closer this time, almost directly behind me. It was a child's giggle. Yes, but it was distorted, elongated, like a broken record player. It was filled with a chilling, malevolent joy. I spun around, my flashlight beam dancing wildly. Nothing, but the air around me was suddenly frigid, and I felt a faint, icy touch on my ankle, like a small, cold hand. The sweet, decaying smell intensified, making my stomach churn. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The sound echoed loudly in the silent room. I didn't wait. I scrambled out of the classroom, my heart hammering against my ribs, and ran. I didn't stop until I was out of the school, the cold night air a welcome relief against my burning lungs. I never went back to Northwood High. I quit my job the next day, telling my supervisor I had found a better opportunity. But the truth was, I couldn't shake the memory of that distorted giggle, or the icy touch on my ankle, and every time I hear a child's laughter in an unexpected place, I still feel that cold dread, wondering if the echo from Northwood High has followed me. Story 2. The Locker Room Mirror. My next unsettling experience took place during my freshman year of college, at the campus gym. It was a state-of-the-art facility, but the women's locker room, particularly the showers and changing area, had a strange, almost oppressive atmosphere. I often went for late-night workouts, and by 11 p.m., the locker room was usually deserted, save for me. One evening, after a particularly grueling workout, I was the last one in the locker room. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a stark, unflattering glow on the rows of metal lockers. I was drying my hair in front of the large, wall-mounted mirror near the entrance. It was an old mirror, with a slightly tarnished frame, and it always seemed to reflect the room with a subtle distortion, making the already empty space feel even more vast and hollow. As I brushed my hair, I caught a movement in my peripheral vision, reflected in the mirror. It was a fleeting glimpse, a shadow detaching itself from the far wall, near the showers. I paused, my brush mid-stroke, and looked directly at the reflection. Nothing, just the empty locker room, stretching out behind me. I told myself it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, or perhaps the flickering lights. I resumed brushing, but the feeling persisted. A prickle of unease, like unseen eyes watching me. I glanced back at the mirror. This time, I saw it more clearly. A figure, indistinct and shadowy, standing at the very end of the locker room, just at the entrance to the shower stalls. It was tall and slender, almost ethereal, and it seemed to be swaying gently, as if caught in an unseen breeze. My heart began to pound. I spun around, my eyes darting to the spot where I had seen the reflection. Nothing. The space was empty. The silence in the locker room was absolute, broken only by the faint drip of water from one of the shower heads. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. What I had seen in the mirror was not there in reality. I turned back to the mirror, my breath catching in my throat. The figure was still there, in the reflection, closer now. It was standing directly behind me, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if observing me with a chilling curiosity. I could almost feel its presence, a cold breath on the back of my neck, though there was nothing there. Its form was still, indistinct, like smoke, but I could make out 2 points of darkness, where its eyes should be, staring directly into my own reflected gaze. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My body was frozen, rooted to the spot. The figure in the mirror began to slowly, almost imperceptibly, raise a hand. It was long and skeletal, with unnaturally elongated fingers. It reached out, its reflection moving closer to my own, until its fingertips were almost touching my reflected shoulder. At that moment, the lights in the locker room flickered violently, plunging the space into near darkness for a terrifying second. When they came back on, the figure in the mirror was gone. The reflection was once again just me, pale and trembling, in the empty locker room. The silence was deafening, but the oppressive atmosphere remained, thick and heavy. I didn't wait. I grabbed my bag, my clothes, and ran. I didn't bother to get dressed properly, just threw on my jacket and sprinted out of the gym. Not stopping until I was back in my dorm room, the door locked and bolted. I never used that locker room again, always opting for the smaller, less private one in the athletic building, even if it meant a longer walk. I still don't know what I saw that night. Was it a trick of the light? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion? Or was it something else? Something that lingered in the old mirror, waiting for a lone reflection to manifest itself? The memory of those dark, unblinking eyes in the reflection still haunts me, and I can never look into a large, old mirror without a shiver of fear, wondering what unseen horrors might be lurking just beyond the glass. Story 3. The Whispering Library. My final, and most profound, encounter with the inexplicable occurred during my graduate studies, while working part-time as a night attendant at the university's main library. It was a sprawling, multi-building a labyrinth of dusty shelves, hushed reading rooms, and hidden alcoves. My job was mostly to ensure quiet, reshelved stray books, and lock up at closing. The library was open 24 hours for students, but after 2 a.m., it was usually just me and a handful of dedicated or desperate scholars. One particular night, a severe thunderstorm had rolled in, rattling the old windows and making the ancient building groan. The power flickered intermittently, casting the vast reading rooms into momentary darkness before the emergency lights hummed to life. Most of the remaining students had packed up and left, leaving me alone in the cavernous silence, punctuated only by the drumming rain and the occasional crack of thunder. I was on the 3rd floor, in the rare books section, a place rarely visited by students and usually kept locked. I was doing a routine check, ensuring all the heavy, leather-bound tomes were properly secured. The air in this section was always heavy, thick with the scent of old paper, dust, and something else, a faint, almost imperceptible smell of ozone, like after a lightning strike. As I walked between the towering shelves, I began to hear it, a faint whispering. It was soft, indistinct, like a multitude of voices murmuring just beyond the edge of hearing. I stopped, straining my ears. The whispering seemed to swirl around me, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't menacing, not at first, more like a gentle, continuous hum of conversation, just out of reach. I dismissed it as the wind whistling through a loose pane, or perhaps the old pipes groaning. But then, I heard individual words, fragments of sentences, carried on the unseen currents. They were in different languages, some I recognized, some I didn't. Latin, Old English, something that sounded like ancient Greek. They spoke of forgotten histories, lost knowledge, and secrets best left undisturbed. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, dancing over the spines of ancient books. The whispering intensified as I moved deeper into the section, becoming clearer, more insistent. It was as if the books themselves were speaking, their stories yearning to be heard. I felt a strange pull, a compelling urge to reach out, to touch the worn covers, to listen more closely. Then, a new sound joined the chorus of whispers, a soft, rhythmic scratching, coming from one of the far corners of the section. It was a delicate, almost hesitant sound, like a quill pen scratching across parchment. I moved towards it, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and an almost irresistible curiosity. The air grew colder, and the ozone smell became sharper. Almost metallic, I rounded a tall bookshelf and saw it. In a small, dimly lit alcove, where an old wooden desk sat, a figure was hunched over. It was a woman, dressed in what looked like old-fashioned academic robes, her back to me. Her hair was long and dark, cascading over her shoulders. She was writing, her hand moving with a fluid grace, the scratching sound emanating from her quill. I stood there, frozen, unable to move. The whispering voices around me grew louder, more distinct, as if urging me forward. The woman didn't seem to notice me. She continued to write, her movements precise and deliberate. I could see the faint glow of an old-fashioned oil lamp on the desk, casting flickering shadows on the wall. Then, she paused. Slowly, agonizingly, she lifted her head and turned. Her face was ancient, etched with lines of profound knowledge and immense sorrow. Her eyes were deep, dark pools, reflecting the faint light of the lamp. They were not looking at me, but through me, as if I were merely a translucent veil. Her lips were moving, forming silent words, and I realized the whispering was coming from her, a continuous stream of forgotten lore. As her gaze swept over me, I felt a sudden, overwhelming pressure in my mind, as if countless thoughts and memories were being poured into my consciousness. Images flashed before my eyes, ancient libraries burning, scholars fleeing with precious scrolls, forgotten. Rituals performed under a moonless sky. It was too much, an unbearable torrent of information that threatened to shatter my sanity. I stumbled backward, clutching my head, the whispering voices now a deafening roar in my ears. The air crackled with an unseen energy. The woman's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something akin to surprise crossing her ancient face. She reached out a hand, her long, slender fingers extending towards me, as if to offer solace, or perhaps to draw me deeper into the abyss of her knowledge. I broke free. With a desperate cry, I turned and ran, blindly scrambling through the maze of bookshelves, the whispering voices pursuing me, echoing in my mind. I didn't stop until I burst out of the library, into the pouring rain, gasping for air. The cold rain was a shock, a welcome jolt back to reality. I never returned to that library. I resigned the next day, citing personal reasons. The memory of the whispering voices, the ancient woman, and the torrent of forbidden knowledge still haunts me. I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, certain I can still hear the faint murmur of forgotten languages, and I wonder what secrets she was trying to impart, or what she was trying to warn me about. The library, I now know, is not just a repository of books, but a living, breathing entity, a keeper of ancient truths that are best left undisturbed.